Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're taking a really fascinating journey through India, basically since its independence in 1947.
Yeah, looking at how things have changed.
Exactly. We've got a great set of sources here. There's Wikipedia's History of India, 1947 present, this India Social Mobility Study from RTI International, the WHO's India Health System Review.
Deloitte's Economic Outlook for next year, May 2025.
Right, and that Ipsos Global Trends India report from 2023. Lots to dig into.
Definitely.
So our mission really is to give you a clear understanding of how India has transformed, hitting the key moments, the big shifts, but without getting totally lost in the weeds.
Exactly. We want to give you that curated understanding of modern India's path. Spotlight the big events, how societies evolve, the economic story. Basically, your shortcut to understanding India today.
Okay, great. So let's unpack this right from the beginning. We have to start at the dawn of independent India, August 15th, 1947. A huge, monumental day. End of British rule.
Absolutely. But this freedom, well, it came at a massive cost, didn't it?
It really did. The partition of the subcontinent into India and Pakistan, primarily along religious lines.
And that led to one of history's largest and, most tragic population transfers.
The scale is just staggering.
Immense upheaval. We're talking over 10 million people forced to move across these new borders. And the violence, estimates are around, 1 million lives lost?
Just devastating. A really traumatic start.
Deeply traumatic, yeah, for both nations.
And somehow, amidst all that chaos, a new republic is being forged.
Right. In 1950, India adopts its constitution, sets itself up as a democratic republic, stays in the Commonwealth, but adopts a Westminster-style parliamentary system.
For anyone maybe not familiar, that basically means the government, the executive, comes from parliament and answers to it.
Okay.
And what's really striking when you look back is how that democratic setup has, lasted.
That's a key point. India's commitment to democratic freedoms, especially when you stack it up against many other newly independent states around that time, is pretty unique. It really stands out.
Absolutely. And the figure leading this new nation, Jawaharlal Nehru, India's first prime minister, often called the architect of modern India.
Yeah, he took on that massive task. Interestingly, though, Mahatma Gandhi, the icon of the independence struggle.
He didn't take any government post.
No, he chose to stay out of formal office. His influence was immense, of course, but it was a different kind of leadership. Nehru was the one shaping policy day to day.
And speaking of shaping things, the actual map of India was changing too, wasn't it? Particularly in the Northeast in those early decades.
Yeah, big changes there. The region of Assam, as it was then, got reorganized quite a bit.
New states being carved out.
Exactly. Nagaland first in '63, then Meghalaya and Mizoram in 1972. Arunachal Pradesh was separated after the '62 war with China, became a state later in '87.
Right. And Manipur and Tripura also became states in '72. Even Assam's capital moved?
Yeah, from Shillong to Dispur near Guwahati.
Yeah.
So a lot of internal boundary drawing happening.
Okay, let's jump forward a bit. The 60s through to the 90s, the political scene, the social fabric, it kept evolving sometimes, quite dramatically.
It really did. That period saw some major shifts and, some pretty tough times, too. Politically, the Congress Party's initial dominance started to weaken.
The Janata Party coalition came in.
Briefly, yeah. But it didn't really hold together. Internal conflicts, maybe a sense of lacking strong leadership. It collapsed pretty quickly, by '79.
And Indira Gandhi came back?
She did. Her Congress faction returned in 1980. But that era, it was also marked by some really significant regional conflicts and, frankly, some terrible tragedies.
Yeah, when you list them, Operation Blue Star, Indira Gandhi's assassination, the anti-Sikh riots in '84 that followed,
The Bhopal gas disaster.
India's involvement in Sri Lanka's civil war, the Siachen conflict. It was a heavy period.
It really tested the nation.
Yeah.
Internal divisions, external pressures, a lot going on. And then the '90s brought their own set of challenges, particularly in Kashmir.
Right. The sources mention this reportedly forced exodus of Kashmiri Pandits, militant actions cited as the cause.
Some accounts call it ethnic cleansing, though, as you noted, the Wikipedia source itself flags the need for stronger sourcing on that specific term. It highlights how complex and contested these histories can be.
Absolutely. A very sensitive issue, clearly.
Deeply sensitive, with very different narratives surrounding it. And tragically, the early '90s also saw another major assassination.
Rajiv Gandhi in '91. Killed by an LTTE suicide bomber while campaigning.
Yes, a shocking event. After that, Congress came back to power, but this time in a coalition led by P.V. Narasimha Rao.
And this government, maybe somewhat unexpectedly, kicked off a really major shift in India's economic direction.
Ah, yes, this is a crucial turning point. The Rao government started this process, gradual at first but really transformative, of economic liberalization.
Opening things up.
Exactly. Moving away from those inward-looking, state-controlled policies, opening up to global trade, foreign investment. It wasn't overnight, but it fundamentally changed India's growth path, unleashed a lot of private sector energy.
A real pivot. And politically, the 90s cemented this shift away from single-party rule, didn't they?
Absolutely. The era of coalition politics was truly here. We saw that brief BJP-led coalition in 96, what was it, 13 days?
Something like that, yeah.
Then the United Front governments. It reflected a much more fragmented political landscape, more regional power.
And then, toward the end of that decade, May 1998.
India declares itself a full nuclear state, a major geopolitical moment with significant global reactions.
Okay, so into the new millennium, the 2000s up to today, what are the big themes? Continued economic growth seems to be one.
Yeah, generally higher GDP growth rates, though with ups and downs.
Yeah.
And India definitely seeking a bigger role on the world stage.
Like the non-permanent seat on the UN Security Council.
Right, 2011-12. And applying for a permanent one with the G4 nations, Brazil, Germany, Japan.
And economically, there was that period where India briefly became the world's biggest arms importer.
Yeah, around 2011, a significant indicator of military modernization and shifting global trade patterns.
And the internal map kept changing, too.
It did. Telangana was formed in June 2014, India's 29th state. That was a result of a long campaign.
And more recently, the changes regarding Jammu and Kashmir.
Yes, the repealing of Article 370, and then reorganizing the former state into two separate union territories, Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh. Major political moves.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And socially, politically, the last few years have been pretty intense, too.
Very eventful. You had the Citizenship Amendment Act in 2019, which led to widespread protests, lots of debate.
The Ayodhya Temple groundbreaking in 2020.
The big farmers' protest in 2020-21. The government pushing significant legislation through Parliament, a lot happening.
And then impacting everything, the COVID-19 pandemic.
Yeah, inescapable. First case reported in Kerala, January 2020. Then the huge effort on vaccine development, the massive rollout campaign.
But also immense challenges. Those record surges in cases, especially April 2021. That must have had a huge impact.
Undoubtedly, on public health, on the economy, on perceptions of the government. Despite some issues, like some holy celebrations ignoring guidelines, India did hit that milestone of 1 billion vaccine doses.
An incredible number, though the full toll, the excess mortality, is still being understood.
Exactly. The analysis is ongoing.
And just bringing us right up to date, Drupadi Murmu becoming the first tribal president in 2022, the Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav celebrations for 75 years of independence.
India becoming the most populous nation in 2023, hosting the G20 summit last year.
The Chandrayaan-3 moon landing near the South Pole, huge achievement.
Absolutely, August 2023.
Yeah.
And then just this past June, Narendra Modi winning the backing to form the government again. So, yeah, a really dynamic, constantly shifting picture.
Okay, let's pivot slightly and focus specifically on that economic trajectory. You mentioned the early decades post-independence, that Nehruvian socialism idea.
Right. Heavy emphasis on state-led industrialization. The 5-year plans were central to that. A mixed economy, yes, but the state played a really dominant role. Figures like Mahalanobis were very influential in planning that.
Focusing on heavy industry.
Exactly, building that industrial base. But then, as we said, that gradual liberalization starting in 91 really changed the game.
Moving away from looking inward.
Yeah, opening up. And that did lead to, generally speaking, higher growth rates.
Propelling India towards being one of the world's major economies. But it hasn't been a smooth, straight line upwards, has it?
Oh, definitely not. There have been fluctuations. Things like demonetization, the rollout of the goods and services tax, GST, they had impacts. And of course, the pandemic hit hard.
Though there was recovery, Moody's upgraded the outlook in 2021 and GDP bounced back in 2022.
It's a complex, ongoing story. And remember that point about India overtaking China as the biggest arms importer? Another sign of those shifting dynamics.
Right. Now let's switch gears to something really crucial and maybe more challenging. Social mobility. That RTI International study you mentioned, it sounds quite sobering.
It is. India's 76th in that World Economic Forum Index back in 2020. That's behind the other big BRIC economies, Brazil, Russia, China.
So what are the main sticking points?
Well, the study points to areas like social protection safety nets, basically. Fair wage distribution is another. And female labor force participation remains quite low. These are seen as major drags on upward mobility for large parts of the population.
And the organizations trying to tackle this, the SPOs, they face hurdles too.
Big ones. Funding is the #1 issue cited, just not enough resources. Then there's the challenge of actually changing mindsets and behaviors among the people they're trying to help.
That must be incredibly difficult.
And attracting and keeping talented staff in the development sector is also tough. Interestingly, the study found that most SBOs, like 65%, weren't actually using professional support, like from consulting or capacity-building organizations.
Really? Why not? Do we know? Or what help do they want?
Well, the study doesn't delve too deeply into the why not, but in terms of what they do want, fundraising help is top of the list. Then capacity building, making their own operations stronger, and using technology better.
Okay. But the really worrying finding seems to be the lack of overall progress since independence.
Yeah, that's stark. While the study did see some improvement for scheduled casts, which is positive, the mobility rates for forward casts and other backward casts, the OBCs, haven't changed much at all.
And other inequalities persist.
Definitely. Literacy rates among people with disabilities are still worryingly low. Big gaps between casual work and salaried jobs depending on caste groups, and lower employment rates for young women compared to young men.
It sounds like a really tangled web. Education is key, presumably.
Everyone agrees education is crucial for mobility. But the problem is, there are still huge disparities in access to quality education and in actual learning outcomes. So just getting kids in school isn't enough if they aren't learning effectively or if certain groups are excluded.
A complex challenge. Does the study see any role for, say, businesses?
Yes, it does. It suggests that businesses can play a role, maybe through their corporate social responsibility, their CSR programs, but also by seeing social mobility as something linked to their own competitiveness. Having a more skilled, diverse workforce benefits them too.
Collaboration seems key then.
Absolutely. Businesses, SBOs, government, working together could really make a difference.
Okay, let's shift again, this time to health and well-being. The WHO's health system review had some interesting points.
Yeah, one thing it highlights is that India is actually the largest global supplier of physicians and exports a lot of healthcare professionals generally.
Which sounds good, but then there's the downside.
The brain drain, exactly. Losing highly skilled professionals who are needed at home.
Huh.
But on the positive side, the review also points to some successful public health initiatives.
Like what?
Things like the National Tobacco Control efforts or the Heat Action Plan developed in Ahmedabad. These show that coordinated action between different agencies can tackle big public health problems effectively.
That's encouraging. And the Ipsos report, looking at attitudes post-pandemic, it seems health has become even more central for people.
Very much so. The survey suggests health is maybe the top unifying trend for Indians now. Understandable, really, given the personal losses and setbacks so many experienced during COVID.
So, more focus on both physical and mental well-being.
Yes, a definite increase in focus there. People are thinking more proactively about staying well, both body and mind. It feels like something many of us everywhere have kind of reevaluated.
And technology's playing a role? Digital health.
Growing confidence there, yeah. Especially in urban areas, people seem more willing to use digital tools for healthcare information, maybe consultations, things like that.
Okay, let's stick with that Ipsos report and look at broader social attitudes. It seems to draw a distinction between urban masses and digital Indians. What are the key differences they found?
Well, one interesting area is individualism versus sticking to social norms. The urban masses seem to be getting a bit more open to individual expression,
Whereas the digital Indians,
showing a slight decline in that openness, surprisingly. Maybe something about online echo chambers or social pressures. The report doesn't speculate heavily, but notes the trend. There's also a difference in views on transgender rights between the two groups.
okay. What about the environment?
Mixed picture. Urban masses generally show more concern about environmental disasters than digital Indians, particularly the younger ones in big cities. But the report also notes that lots of traditional sustainable practices are just, well, normal in many Indian households already.
Right. Baked into daily life.
Yeah.
And trust. Trust in institutions.
That's shifting too. Among digital Indians, there's generally less trust in business leaders compared to before, although interestingly, trust has increased among digital Indians in the South.
A regional difference.
Yeah. But those same digital Indians tend to show more belief in capitalist institutions overall. It's complex. One thing that is consistent is strong national pride across the board. A real desire for India to, shine globally.
And nostalgia. Does the past play differently for these groups?
It seems so. Digital Indians show a stronger pull towards the past. maybe preferring certain aspects of it. The urban masses seem more focused on the here and now and the future.
And data privacy, with everything online.
Digital Indians, especially the big metros, seem less worried about the government knowing things about them. Although younger people within that group are starting to show more concern. So maybe a generational shift happening there.
And finally, how people shop, consumer behavior.
Digital Indians are looking for authenticity, for trust. They'll pay more for brands they trust. They want smooth online shopping, but still value having, like, a human to talk to if needed. And we're seeing global brands pushing further into smaller towns and cities.
So the market's evolving, becoming more sophisticated.
Definitely. Consumers have specific expectations that brands need to meet.
Okay, let's look ahead now with that Deloitte Economic Outlook for May 2025. They sound a note of caution about GDP growth.
Yeah, they talk about a potential moderation in growth. And that raises concerns about reaching that big goal of Viksit Bharat, developed India by 2047. Especially with, global economic challenges, headwinds.
But tax changes might help domestically.
Possibly. Tax exemptions for middle-income earners are expected to boost disposable income, maybe lead to more consumer spending, which could help growth.
But trade could be an issue.
That's a potential negative. The report suggests some new tariff policies might actually hurt India's export growth.
So what does Deloitte think needs to happen for growth to stay strong?
They list a few key things. Resolving trade uncertainties, hopefully the Reserve Bank easing monetary policy, interest rates, continued government spending on infrastructure that's crucial, stable global oil prices would help, and just keeping investor confidence high.
So a mix of domestic policy and, hoping the global situation stays reasonably stable.
Pretty much, yeah. It's a
Right.
complex equation.
Okay, so wrapping this all up. After diving into all these sources, what are the main takeaways about India's journey since 47?
Well, it's clear India has been through this incredible, multifaceted transformation. Politically, socially, economically, you see this unwavering commitment to democracy, which is remarkable. Then there's the huge ongoing impact of that economic liberalization that started in the 90s. But alongside that progress, you've got these really persistent, difficult challenges around social mobility.
These inequalities are stubborn.
They really are. We also see this heightened focus now on health and well-being, especially post-pandemic. And these evolving social attitudes, shaped so much by technology and global connections. The drive for economic growth is still central, obviously, but it's facing a much more uncertain global picture now.
Right, so building on all that, here's a final thought for you, the listener, to chew on. We've seen these contrasting trends like individualism versus tradition and these deep-rooted challenges in social mobility. So how can India effectively balance its incredibly rich cultural heritage with all these forces of modernization, globalization, technology? How does it balance all that to make sure progress is truly equitable, that it reaches everyone in the coming years?
That's the big question, isn't it? That complex interplay, that balancing act. That feels like it's going to define India's next chapter.